special feature.
Pickle.
Corporal Dwayne Hicks, TQ40482115E9. Distress. My unit has suffered immense casualties on LV-426 and requests immediate assistance aboard the USS Sulaco. Of the survivors, myself, 2 human females, one of which is a child, and a damaged synthetic. Consider all Colonial Marines dispatched to LV-426 to be KIA. Repeat, all Marines dispatched to LV-426 were KIA.
Hey guys, what's going on? You are listening to ThisWeekInGeek.net. I'm your host, Mike, the Birdman Dodd. And as you've noticed over the last couple of weeks, we have been talking with some pretty cool people in the role-playing game industry. I mean, we are huge fans of rolling dem bones, such as it may be across our various tables in the universe, be them virtually, which you should be, respecting social distancing, because hey, as Lieutenant Ripley once said, we break quarantine, we die. Truer words were never spoken. And we're going to be talking about one of my favorite universes. So we're going to be indeed leaving Anchor Point Station and taking off to the frontier, going to LV-426 and seeing what's left of the crater that was once known as Hadley's Hope. That's right. We're going to be talking about Free League Publishing's Alien, the RPG. And I don't need to tell you guys how much of an Alien fanboy I've been pretty much since 1986 when the first Aliens sequel came out. That movie pretty much changed how I viewed cinema for many, many years. Ripley's been one of my favorite characters in movies for years. And it turns out this isn't the first RPG that has ever been developed involving the Aliens property. There was one in the late 80s, which I think was called the Aliens Adventure Game. And I've taken a look over it. It's complicated, to say the very least. And I've always wanted to know why we haven't seen more adventures in the Aliens universe. And I've seen various fan games over the years, and I've seen various board games done up as well. There's actually a pretty cool online one. I don't know whether it's still around anymore, where you could play the Aliens characters. But so a little while, I think last year, they put out an Alien role-playing game thing, which is kind of like a quick start, which was kind of neat, and it got my curiosity piqued. And if you guys remember last year, I did a review of the Aliens RPG proper. So I reached out to some of my friends in the RPG industry, and they set me up with the game's director, or mother, as you might say. And I want to thank John for setting this up. And we're going to be welcoming Tomas Haremstam to the show. And he is the game's director who helped put this wonderful little project together for us. And I guess without any further ado, let's welcome company man from Wayland, Utah himself, Tomas Haremstam. Tomas, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah, yes, it is exciting to talk with a game designer, because it's nice to talk with someone who's on the design side of these things, simply because I'm learning all different systems as the various RPGs that I talk about, be they D&D, Pathfinder, Star Wars, and the Free League stuff is something different that I really like, because it's fairly simple. Basically, get a 6, you succeed. Get more 6s, cooler things happen. Get 1s, bad things happen. So it's a simple system, hard to master at times, but gives the GM and the players infinite possibilities for creating unique situations for their player characters. So I guess let's talk about the development of the Alien RPG, because this is a license I can imagine that would be fairly restrictive. But then again, I'm not the creative type. There's a reason I don't work in this industry yet, because the Alien movies always seem to follow a certain arc, I guess. Basically, monster comes on board, people fight the monster. Usually only 1 or 2 people come out of it alive, and it never ends up very well for people going into it. But your game has something I've never quite seen before. There's the published scenarios, which are like cinematic things. I think you have one right now, which is Chariot of the Gods, and there are more forthcoming, and then there's more of the campaign style play. So I'd love for you to talk to me a little bit about the game's development with these two styles of play in mind.
Sure. I mean, yeah, like you said there, you have the cinematic mode and the campaign mode. And the cinematic mode is very much thought of as like playing an alien movie. And that means you probably won't all get out alive. So they kind of going into it, this is a one shot, you have the pre-generated characters, you play hard, bad things happen, and maybe a few of the characters will actually make it, but most likely not all. That doesn't really work for campaign play because you also we wanted to create the possibility to explore this universe in a more of a sandbox way in the campaign style to actually go wherever you want and really explore, because there's so much world building there that doesn't all come through in the movies, but there's a lot of expanded universe stuff. There's like the video games, comics, books, all kinds of things that have created this universe. We wanted to kind of give the opportunity to dive deep into that. And for that, you have campaign play, which works a little bit differently. Then you can continue playing for a longer time with the same characters. And yeah, so that was a big part of developing this game, just to dive into the setting and it's been around for such a long time now. So there's so much lore to dig into and kind of make sense of and kind of pick on what to focus on, what not to focus on, what to include, what not to include. That was a lot of fun. And I should say that, I mean, I'm mostly responsible for the game design as far as rules. You mentioned the rule system before, so that's kind of my area, whereas the setting stuff is mostly a guy called Drew Gaska who did setting work. That's I shouldn't take credit for. He's the lore master for the game.
One of the things that I did kind of notice, as you mentioned, there's the two separate modes of play. One of the things I noticed, particularly in the cinematic campaign settings, is you do have a focus on PvP or agendas, and I've never seen that in any RPGs that I've ever played as a core mechanic. I mean, sure, we've had player versus player stuff come up before, but generally it's not encouraged because, don't make the party fight each other. But in Aliens movies, they're inevitably part of the process. Like in Alien, Ash goes nuts. In Aliens, Burke is a dickhead. And there's always some asshole at some point.
So with that guy, so we really wanted to include that in the game, so that's why it's there. But it's a tricky thing to have in games, sure. And it's also something we tried a few versions of during playtesting, and it's more of a part of cinematic play than campaign play, because in campaign play you're supposed to continue playing for a longer time with the same group of characters, and it doesn't. Sure, you can have tensions in the group and all that, but you can't really have them go all out attacking each other because it just falls apart at that point. In cinematic mode, it works better since it's one shots, but even there we realized that we have to manage it somehow. In the first you have something called the personal agendas, and every character gets one at the beginning of the scenario. The first iterations of the rules, you just had one personal agenda for each character, and some of those could be fairly antagonistic. You could have like the Burke type character with that goes completely against all the other characters. The problem was that if that player goes into that agenda too fast, that you can get that PvP going too soon, and it kind of derails the scenario right at the beginning. So that's why we have the structure now, the 3 acts. You have Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3. And each pre-generated character gets their own agenda for each act. That way we can kind of balance it out and kind of have like the Burke character in Act 1, his agenda won't be kill everybody. It's going to be make yourself useful, make the others trust you, something along those lines. That means you kind of wait with that very antagonistic, all full out PvP stuff until the very end. At that time, it's fine because that's the grand finale. It's like the end of the scenario. So it's fine that everything falls apart at that point. You just don't want it to happen too early in the game. So that's the thinking behind that.
So as you were developing the ideas for like kind of cinematic play, I would say that's more involved than a lot of published module type stuff I've seen before. What's your design aims when you want future game mothers to put together their scenarios? Just because you have to figure out what pre-generated characters they're going to put into a scenario. Basically, when it just seems like a lot more work goes into this, but it seems like there's a little bit more possibilities and flexibility because you already have all your players on the board, but it just seems like there's more work to set up the agendas for each scenario. So you're writing the module, you have a definite end in mind.
Yeah, I mean, that's if you write your own, we have some guidelines for writing your own cinematic scenarios in the core rulebook. And I think doing that is kind of cool because then you can basically create characters with the players, and then you can write your scenario about the characters, because that's kind of how the cinematics work, that characters are not really replaceable and they're not random adventures. You just take one out and throw in another. Instead, the characters are integral to the story, and that means the characters and their backstory and their motivations are a big part of the scenario, which means that you either need pre-generated characters like in Attack of the Gods and Destroyer of Worlds, the two we are working on so far, or you can have the GM write their own cinematic scenario basing it on characters created by the players. And then you could have discussion, what kind of scenario should it be, where should it be, what kind of stuff would be happening, where should it, and then if you have that, you can really build your own movie or write your own movie script. It's not, I mean, obviously giving a lot of freedom to the players, but still having those characters, the cast of characters, and that really build your own scenario on that, which I think is a lot of fun.
Now, one of the things that I think is very interesting, because the Alien universe is obviously big, scary monsters, but it's also a tale of, as you put it, as cosmic body horror and corporate greed and human kind of hubris. What was it like to design a game around those things? Because I have just recently watched Alien Covenant a couple of weeks back for Alien Day, and this was my first time viewing it and watching David essentially wipe out the engineers because he wanted to create life, because Peter Weyland kind of screwed him over because, you know, he's got a God complex and now he's going to have a God complex. What is it like to tell these new types of stories in a role-playing game format? Because I've never seen anything like this. Like, I've seen corporate influence games like in Shadowrun, you know, you're fighting against the Renraku Corporation because they want to develop X product. But I've never seen... Alien has always come across to me as a more philosophical game in some ways, because the two new movies do address a lot of these philosophical themes and whatnot, whereas the Alien is more like a horror movie. Aliens is Vietnam in space. Alien 3 is a prison movie, and Alien Resurrection we won't talk about.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm asking, what's the design kind of through line there in terms of presenting the game to you?
Yeah, I mean, that's something we try to handle because, like you mentioned, those different kind of themes that go into the movies, and we wanted to bring those out in the game as well. So we kind of boiled it down to three main themes. And basically, it follows movies in that the first theme is space horror. That's like the original movie. Then you have the sci-fi action theme, which is aliens. And then we call it sense of wonder, but you could kind of call it, I mean, it's that kind of philosophical side of things that maybe comes across more in the prequels. I think these three themes should to some extent be part of every scenario of the game, but each scenario will focus more on one of the themes than the others. For example, Chariot of the Gods is mostly space horror. It kind of emulates a lot of first original movie stuff. Destroyer of Worlds is more of a sci-fi action type thing. And actually the next cinematic scenario we will make will probably have a focus. It won't be exactly prequel, but it will be more focused on the sense of wonder exploration thing. But all of them have something of each of these three things going on, but they focus on different themes each scenario. So that's kind of how we wanted to bring them all in, and identify them so that they're really clear to game mothers and players that these themes are kind of central to the game. And then kind of also, I mean, like the personal agendas that these themes come across there as well. so you can kind of enforce them using the agendas and these kinds of tools that are available in the game.
Now, we've mentioned Destroyer of Worlds a couple of times during this interview, but for those of the people that aren't familiar, I know Destroyer of Worlds was announced most recently on Alien Day, the 26th of April, 2020, and I think it comes out in August. For those of my listeners that aren't necessarily familiar, what is Destroyer of Worlds aiming to be?
It's kind of a sequel to Chariot of the Gods. It does not continue the story in the sense that it follows the same character. So it's not. It doesn't. You can't continue playing because it's very unlikely that any or most characters from Chariot would have survived. Some might have, but most likely not all. This is a completely new cast of characters. In Destroyer of Worlds, you will play colonial marines. So it's similar to Aliens in that sense. So, I mean, if you watch Aliens, you really get a sense of what kind of stuff you'll be doing in Destroyer of Worlds. Of course, it's not a copy of the movie by any. There's a lot of twists and surprises along the way. But the setup is basically you're stuck on a moon colony, and you go out hunting. Actually, you get your mission. Your initial mission is to hunt for other Marines who have gone missing on this colony where a lot of stuff is happening. It's kind of the setup of it all. I won't go into detail because I don't want to spoil anything, but it's an action-packed scenario with a lot of scares as well, and a little bit of sense of wonder thrown in there also. So it's compared to Chariot, it's a similar kind of thing, but it's a bigger scenario. It's probably going to take a bit longer to play, more to explore, more to do, more action, more danger. So it's bigger and better, and I'm really looking forward to seeing people get their hands on it.
All right, so that does actually sound kind of neat. I mean, that sounds a lot more exciting than what I was originally envisioning. And what I mean by that is I've only recently started using published modules in my stuff, in my personal RPG game. So does sound neat that I'm going to get a chance to basically do the rescue mission that should have happened in Aliens after they were 17 days overdue. So I'm kind of excited for that. So my next question is, what are some of the other upcoming supplements that people might be kind of looking forward to? Because obviously you've got this on the horizon for August. But I guess one question I'd like to know is, why go with a published scenario and not something like the Colonial Marines book? Like, I know a lot of people on Facebook and Reddit have been asking for this book right out of the gates as the next big thing. And I guess I'm asking, when might we expect to see the Colonial Marines book?
Yeah, I mean, actually, to be honest, the original plan was to launch these at the same time, Destroyer of Worlds and the campaign source book for Colonial Marines. So you could actually kind of use them together. But we have sometimes things take a bit longer than you want, and we needed to really nail these things. I mean, these things have to be. I mean, we cannot compromise on quality on any level in these things. So basically, we realized we would not be able to, because the idea was to release them both in August. Around Gen Con was the idea. But we realized we won't be able to finish the Colonial Marine book in time. So we decided to go ahead with Destroyer, and then the handbook is well on its way. So right now the plan is to release it at the end of the year, so November or December, just a few months after, basically. And I think that works fairly well because you can get the Destroyer Worlds, play that, which is a cinematic scenario. It includes everything you need. You don't really need a source book to play Destroyer because it's already got everything. And then if you can continue playing Marines and go deeper into that with the source book, that will just come around a couple of months after. So that's kind of the setup as it looks right now.
That's very exciting. This means it'll be a Christmas spent with incinerators and pulse rifles. Yeah, pretty excited for that. So one of the questions I'd like to ask you as the game's designer and huge kind of overseer of the entire project, although I understand you're not the kind of lore master behind this, but I'm curious to know, what material were you allowed to use when developing and licensing this game? Because the Alien license is huge. There's comics, there's video games, there's novels, there's a whole sorts of variety of different media. What stuff were you allowed to pull into this?
Yeah, it's like you said, there's a lot of stuff being produced in the last 40 years that we could kind of dig into, and we did. And like I mentioned, Drew even more, because he's the true lore expert. I'm obviously a big fan of the franchise, but don't have the expertise on his level. But I mean, we dug into all of that, and there's so many Easter eggs in the core rulebook that you wouldn't believe. There's like little things, just word here and there, that refer back to some comic or some novel or something from back when. There's a lot of stuff. We really tried to pull everything together. We couldn't focus on everything equally, so some stuff are just kind of, but other stuff is focused on more directly. I think we had the whole lore to base our game on. Possibly with the exception of the Predator and the Alien versus Predator franchise, because that's actually technically legally a separate thing. So that's not part of what we've been doing at all. That's its own thing, 100%. So that was not part of our work. Also, Alien 4 Resurrection is not really part of it so much, because our game is set shortly after Aliens and Alien 3, so it's after all of the movies except Alien 4, which is set like 200 years later, so it's like almost a different universe or different setting altogether. So that doesn't quite factor in, since it's stuff and what happens there came so much later than our game is set. There's one exception though. It's like a fun little Easter egg. Actually, in the chariot scenario, there's a ship there. It's a reference to the Betty ship in Alien 4. And there is actually a story about that ship is said in the movie and lore around that it's a very, very old ship and an old design. So it kind of makes sense in the lore that some version of that model could actually exist 200 years before. So we kind of included that as a fun little Easter egg in Chariot. So, but I mean, that's just kind of on that level. Apart from that, you won't see anything from Alien 4 in the game.
So to kind of continue along this train, so you mentioned you can't include the Predator stuff because it's a different license entirely. Can you sneak in Easter eggs towards that, or is that just too legally gray, perhaps?
I guess it's a question of I think Drew might have slipped in a reference or three. To be honest,
you know what? So. I'm fine with that. Will we see something maybe as a little bit of campaign fluff? As you mentioned, you have put Easter eggs towards Alien Resurrection with a precursor to the Betty. Would you ever expand upon stuff, or is there certain things you're not allowed to do?
No, I don't think so. I mean, apart from the Alien vs. Predator stuff, we couldn't go into that in any meaningful way. That would be off limits for sure. But apart from that, all the Alien stuff is open for us. I mean, everything we do is, of course, subject to approval by 20th Century Studios. So we cannot publish anything without their sort of go-ahead. But that process has so far been very smooth and been great. I mean, they have not... obviously had feedback, which is great, but nothing. It has not been a difficult cooperation. Quite the opposite. It's been very, very smooth.
I was about to say, yeah, it seems like these people are giving you a fair degree of kind of latitude, because I did an interview a few weeks back, and I know we were talking about Star Wars, for example, and the licensing people were either really welcoming or they'd push back on certain things, and it's really refreshing to hear that the licensors are really willing to work with you to let you create whatever you want for this world, or to make this world live and breathe such as it can for players and game mothers alike to make their own stories in the Alien kind of universe. This would be a more of a question for Drew, but I want to ask it anyway. When might we see a book based on the Xenos themselves? Like, are we ever going to see a monster manual type book?
Yeah, I mean, that is a good question. Like, of course, the xenomorphs are a big part of the universe and a big part of the game, but there's also that risk of over using them and over exposing them, and then they become less threatening and less interesting, potentially. So we have been a bit careful not to do like a monster manual style chapter in the book. I mean, there is a meaty chapter on the xenomorphs in the core rule book, but it doesn't show everything in detail. It still leaves quite a lot to the imagination, and and that's kind of been the way we've approached this, because we wanted to keep them a little bit hidden and not overexpose them in the game. But that said, we will have more types of xenomorphs going forward, and that definitely something that, I mean, Drew and I are working on, kind of look new versions, because that's another way of making. Because if you've seen the films, you know the most common types, but then there's different types, so you can develop that and go in more to other versions of xenomorphs. There's really an endless variety there that we can explore, and that will also be a way to keep them fresh and scary and different. You won't know exactly what to expect every time. So we'll be doing that definitely going forward. So probably already there is a new type of xenomorph included in Destroyer of Worlds. But still, there is something there that you have not seen before. So, and that's what we will be doing. We will be introducing new things going forward, but maybe without kind of explaining everything, showing everything, and still trying to keep them mysterious and scary.
But so yeah, that's something that I'm really looking forward to seeing, is how you expand the lore. Because as I was reading the chapter on xenomorphs, it was nice noticing the little Easter eggs. You can tell where certain things have come from. The fact that they you guys have openly addressed that what is a Praetorian, how that fits into the caste system of the aliens. And one question I'm so glad you guys answered is, which came first, the alien or the egg? And you actually explained that. And I was about to say, that's interesting, because now that we have the background of Prometheus and Covenant, we know the engineers are genetic masters. They can do whatever they want. So the aliens can literally turn you into an alien egg if the hive is threatened and a drone is out on their own. And that's a fandom question that a casual fan wouldn't know unless they really dug into the lore or saw that deleted scene from the director's cut. And now you guys have been able to expand upon that. So definitely bravo on that.
Right, yeah, I mean, that's super fun. That's part of what's been so cool about working on this, is getting the chance to dig into all these things that are just referenced in the films, or like you mentioned in this case, even in deleted scenes, but they're still kind of relevant and interesting, and we could have a chance to go into that in the game.
Now, these are some questions that I would love to know just from my personal kind of standpoint here. I know other game companies release supplements that maybe give stats or backgrounds to the major characters of the films. Like in Star Wars, there's always a supplement for, hey, here's the stats for Luke Skywalker. Will you guys ever do a standalone supplement, or maybe for a future Alien Day? You're like, hey guys, to celebrate Alien Day, here is the Marines from the Sulaco, or here's Ripley, or here's the Bishop model android.
Yeah, maybe. We do have. Generally, we haven't focused on the actual characters from the universe so much, and from the films, mostly because it kind of gets. I mean, we want to the kind of the feel and the theme and of the films, but not portray the same actual characters, because then it kind of gets hard maybe to immerse yourself in a character if you see the actor in front. I mean, it kind of works. I remember that, like, I played back in back when there was an Indiana Jones role-playing game by TSR, I think, like in the 80s that I used to play. And in that game, you actually played like Indiana Jones short round. You played the characters from the film exactly as they were. And it's kind of fun, but it also gets a bit distracting in a way. I think it's more interesting to create unique and new characters in the universe and explore those. But that said, there's definitely a lot of references. Especially for synthetics, androids, because you can imagine them being made in multiple units and over a long period of time. So maybe, those you can play with that and have people that type of character quite easily come back. Maybe not the exact same person, but the same model or something. So we are playing around with that quite a bit in scenarios. So you will definitely see like references and hints and Easter eggs and that kind of thing relating back to some characters from the films.
And I guess as one of my final questions for this interview, because your game is set just a couple years after Aliens and Alien 3, that seems to be a really big area for exploration. Like all the films have happened except Alien Resurrection. So you're given this huge sandbox to play in. What are some of the cool possibilities that you guys have got sitting on a whiteboard somewhere? Like we've talked about Destroyer of Worlds, the Colonial Marines. You have this huge background to the Alien universe set up, like just reading the book. You talk about Zeta Reticuli. You talk about the Outer Veil. You talk about a new anchor point station coming together. What's it like to have all the toys, or maybe the Kenner toys, so to speak, if you want, of the Alien universe in front of you? Like, that's got to be exciting.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It's so much fun. So, just like you said, it's why we chose that period, because it's all the movies, well, except one, but pretty much all of the others have happened. So you have all of that is like a backstory, a history of the world that you can kind of, everyone also, players will have seen who have seen the films will have that, knowing that, okay, so I'm coming into this world, but all this stuff has happened. Now what's going to happen? And that's like the perfect starting point. And you have so much to draw from, and there's a lot of stuff happening going forward. You also have the different colonies and rivalry between them. You have the stuff from the United Americas and the Union of Progressive Peoples and the kind of rivalry, and then of course the corporations that was happening there. So there's a lot of stuff happening in like the bigger universe that we also want to build on, and that's going to be more clear, even more from the campaign books, because the cinematic scenarios are quite focused in there. So there is like can be big politics in the background, but mostly they will be fairly focused on a specific place and time. The campaign books can really dig into the bigger picture, these bigger schemes that are happening in the setting at this time. So we're really going to be exploring that forward when we design the next campaign books and cinematics too.
I gotta say, it's an exciting time. I'm so glad a company who has a love and respect for this license has it. And I'm really excited the fact that you guys have licensors that are willing to let you play in this universe. So, not gonna lie, I'm gonna throw myself in the hypersleep until August, because now I'm pretty excited to check out Destroyer of Worlds. And if people want to find out more about the Alien RPG, Thomas, where would they have to go?
I guess the best and easiest place is just the website. It's alien-rpg.com. So alien RPG with a little dash in between. And there you can find basic information about the game. Check out the pre-order we also have a starter set. If you're new to the game, the starter set is also coming out in August. A boxed starter set with everything you need, including the chariot scenario, and then Destroyer, of course. And through this website, you can find, you can sign up for a newsletter and whatever else you might need. So alien-rpg.com.
All right, Thomas, I just want you to hold the line for just a second. All right, guys, that was my interview with Tomas Haremstam from Free League Publishing, the guys that made the Alien RPG. Hopefully, this is something you guys will want to check out. I think cinematic play is a fantastic way to check this game out for you and your friends for a night. If you want to spend a night of social distancing, exploring the corridors of maybe the Sulaco, or you want to go explore other places around the Alien universe. There are so many cool planets that they detail. There's more stuff about the alien life cycle even I didn't know, and I'm a huge alien dork. The fact that they talked about the royal jelly makes me so happy they pulled that from the Dark Horse comics and novels. Oh my god, they went deep. I love it. So this is a fairly easy to learn system. You should check it out. I've played a couple of sessions myself, and it's a hearty recommend, as I mentioned in my review a couple of months ago. So we will be checking out Destroyer of Worlds when that comes out. You better goddamn believe I'm getting my hands on that Colonial Marines book. So look forward to that later on this year. So anyway, guys, for This Week in Geek, I've been your host, Mike the Birdman Dodd. And as my friend Jackie Bam Bam might say, be cool, be kind, be careful. We'll catch you guys again next time, right here on ThisWeekInGeek.net.
There's gotta be a way of killing it. How? How do we do it?
You can't. Bullshit. You still don't understand what you're dealing with, do you? Perfect organism. Its structural perfection is matched only by its hostility.
You admire it?
I admire its purity, a survivor, unclouded by conscience, remorse, or delusions of morality. I can't lie to you about your chances, but you have my sympathies.